Puxeu já... Vale, OK. Oh, hi. Hello. I didn't know I was on. Welcome. Okay. All right. You're now in the real world. This is Earth, Catalonia, Barcelona, Sónar 2019+D. Welcome. Welcome you all to this first panel. You're in for a treat. We have a wonderful panel here today. We're going to talk about the new frontiers in spatial computing, which is a really exciting area. So in this real world where we are, humans have been creating virtual and imaginary worlds for thousands of years in our imagination. And we always found the tools, since we are social animals, we always found the tools to share them with other humans. From talks around fire to we were able at some point to write those stories down and those worlds down and share them with thousands of people. With film and TV, we got a way to create a window to all these imaginary worlds that we could see through a square, what they were and what kind of things they were. And lately, only for the first time ever, in human history, we have now tools that let us not just create these worlds, but also live them, navigate them, feel them, see them in wonderful image quality, and hear them in 3D, touch, feel them. And we have a panel of wonderful artists, developers, and that we would like to share with you. We first have Timoni West. She's the director of XR research at Unity. She's an expert in tools creation. So we're going to see how, from what kind of tools we have and what kind of tools we're thinking when we're creating these worlds and authoring and navigating them. We also have Igal Nassima. He's a Turkish-born artist and programmer. That the founder of Superbright, a company in New York, that they do amazing stuff with VR, AR, XR, and physical computing. He's going to tell us about his latest projects. And we have three people from Barcelona. We have a lot of talent here in Barcelona as well. And we have three people from Nomada Studios here in Barcelona. We have Adrián, we have Roset, and we have Conrad. And they're going to tell us about the world that they created, for the immersive world that they created with the game Gris. So without further ado, I think that we will start with Timoni. And you have a presentation. We'll have some time later for Q&A. And then we'll just get started.
Hi, everyone. As they mentioned, I'm Timoni West, and I lead AR, VR, MR, whatever you want to call it, spatial computing research in Unity Labs. How many people have heard of Unity before? So many people. Great. For the very few of you who haven't, Unity is a 3D game engine that is used to make some of, I think, the best games that are out there today, including Gris. But it's also being used to simulate worlds in the real-world environment. It's used for creating data for machine learning. As it turns out, when you create something that's a game engine, it ends up being a full world engine. And people are really taking advantage of that. That's a little bit of shilling. We're most popular one today. And it looks like this. And we support all of these different platforms, which is why it's so popular, because you can just build with Unity once and then go anywhere. And a bunch of stuff has been made with it. We've got AR. This one's really fun, by the way. I recommend it. All this different stuff that was made with Unity, including Gris. There it is. Da-da-da-da-da. Lots and lots of the games. Something like 80% of all phones have an app that is made with Unity, and there are billions of downloads every year, which is pretty cool. So in the labs team that I am a part of, we focus on a few different areas: advanced user experience, to graphics research, human facial capture. I just want to mention this because the spatial computing stuff tends to be pretty popular and people are aware of it. But we do work and think about all of the advanced technology pretty holistically. And we're all across the world. So we have offices in Montreal, in Canada, California, where I'm based, Seattle, et cetera, et cetera. But today I'm going to specifically be talking about the tools that we have made for spatial computing so far. So one of the first tools that we started working on in 2015 is a Unity extension that lets you see the scene view in virtual reality. In other words, you can put on the headset and actually be in Unity and laying out your game the way you would in real life. So here's a little peek at what that looks like when you're in the editor in your game and you're actually just moving stuff around. Video, please. So this is just like a regular asset pack that we downloaded from the store. I think it costs, 20 American dollars, and you can go in and actually just lay out things. One interesting thing we found is that when you have the ability to do whatever you want in virtual reality, when there's no physics and there's no gravity, it turns out people fuck up constantly because they don't recognize the power that they have. You have God power now. So we had to create a whole series of different ways for you to interact with objects. This is kind of the classic way that people expect to work with Unity, with gizmos and radials. But you can also reach out and grab objects directly and manipulate them. As it turns out, you usually don't want to do that because in the real world, it's a little bit easier to put a cup on a table. You have gravity working with you. So we had to come up with a bunch of different constraints like rotation on a plane or only moving on a specific axis in order for people to be able to be more precise about object placement. I'm actually giving a class on this tomorrow, and I'll go into depth about all of the weird stuff we learned about how humans think versus how they think in virtual reality. Let's move on to the next video. I wanted to show, if I hit next, we'll go. Can we go to the next slide? I think that's the same thing. Next slide. There you go. Cool. OK, I wanted to show an example of this, too, because this one's pretty trippy. We found out you can scale the world in Editor XR. If you've ever used Tilt Brush, for example, you can do something similar. But often you want to see a smaller version of the real world that you're in so you can move very large objects more precisely. So we came up with this thing called the mini-map. And it's just another view of the same space you're in. You can move yourself, and you can also move. So right now he's moving himself around the space. But then there's also two of them that are open. You can scale them to different sizes, and then you can do something like pick up a building or an object, and you can pull it out into the world next to you, or you can move it between these two other views. So here, for example, he's taking a tree out of there, and he's putting it in the other side, and you can see it actually moving in the real world. In other words, you have three views of the same environment at different scales, and you can move between all of them at the same time. This is very trippy, but it actually is incredibly practical and kind of analogous to how we use computers 2D as well, when you have multiple screens open at the same time. Next slide, please. We also did an integration with Google Poly, so you can actually, we'll see, we'll pull up here in a second. So you can actually download any of the free 3D models that people have made with Tilt Brush or with blocks and just put them directly into your scene. You can download stuff from Unity's asset store as well, but the cool thing about this is you get to see other people's art, and you can literally just, it'll download from the internet. It takes a few minutes to load the model in the scene, but if you want to create a scene that has Bruce Lee fighting a dragon and then add a fox, you can do that with this integration. Next slide, please. And you can also use a scene fusion extension so that you can be in your scene, in your game, with other people at the same time. Let's see if this loads. cool. So here you see they've got multiple people in the same space at the same time, and one of them is not even in virtual reality. They're actually in regular Unity on the desktop, but you can all be in the same thing together. All right, so that's Editor XR. It's available on GitHub, and we released it under an MIT X11 open source license, which means that you can extend it as much as you want and play around, make your own tools with it. We also have done some work on less sort of developer-focused tools for virtual reality. So I want to show you a video of one project we had called Carte Blanche. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Yeah. OK, cool. All right. So this is much more constrained. In Editor XR, we let you do whatever you want at any scale you want, and you can move objects any way you want to. As it turns out, this can be very overwhelming. So we created this much more simplified experience that has a lot of internal logic. It is much more analogous to using Legos or playing Minecraft, for example. But people could get to good really quickly with this. So we allowed you to scale, and we changed the model on the fly to turn from a bush into a tree. You had a bunch of different sort of floor assets that you couldn't rotate. They were only constrained to be rotated in a specific way. So you get into VR, you sit at this table, and you build a little game level as if you were playing with toys. That was the idea. People really liked this a lot. And the cool thing was, once you were done, I think that video cut out too soon, but once you were done, you hit play, and then you could go in and play the level that you had just made and shared it with your friends. All right, next video. We also created a toolkit. In making these tools, we realized how many different options there are for even basic things like locomotion. There are 6 different ways to move around your scene view in Editor XR alone. You can use blink locomotion, you can fly, you can move the world, you can kind of grab and drag. There's a bunch of stuff. So we created this toolkit so that any developer can actually just take all of the stuff that we have made and put it into their Unity project. Next slide. And here's just another example of different types of interaction. One is with the ray. You pick up objects at a distance, move them towards you, but then you can also dip in directly and move the object around. Next slide, please. We also did some prototyping work around what does it look like if we're using AR mobile as a sort of digital window into virtual reality. So here we have someone using this animation prototype tool that we made and then using a mobile device to actually see into it. Next slide. And we also made a wireframe app for Magic Leap, because as we started to move into mixed reality over the last year, we realized that it was incredibly important for us to be actually designing the UI for this in the medium itself. How many of you have tried a Magic Leap or a HoloLens before? Only a few. OK. For those of you who haven't, the field of view is so small, it's analogous to like putting your kind of head up like this. You can't see anything digital outside of a very specific frustum. And although you can remember this and think about it, the reality is it's very hard to design for unless you're actively in it. So we wanted to make tools like this for the community so that everyone can go on their Magic Leap and actually start figuring out the interface that they're going to need to make. OK. Yeah, next slide. So I think I'm confused, and this is from another talk. But I will tell you what you're looking at here, because it is related to what we're going to be talking about. So one of the things that people don't realize about this new technology that we're working in with spatial computing is what a change has occurred over the last 10 to 15 years in terms of how computers actually are. There was a big shift when we went from the desktop to small mobile computers, and I think everyone was aware of what a big deal that was. But ever since then, we have been increasingly adding a vast amount of sensors to our computers, and that has been a slow but fundamental shift in terms of how computers are aware of the world itself. So this is for the talk I'm giving tomorrow, actually, but this is just a list of all of the different types of sensors that you can have on any HMD device today. And now it depends on if you have an Oculus or a Vive or Magic Leap or HoloLens, but the reality is, just in terms of camera alone, we're talking up to 16 cameras on a single device, each of whom has a different function. Next slide, or I think I can do it myself. Right, exactly. And even within this, even if you just have something as simple, for example, as like a mobile AR app that you're making, you'll see that they have a variety of different tools in place, and they also have different core tech stacks. And this is a tremendous challenge to our developer community. Actually, now I remember why I put these slides in. This is the problem space that we are dealing with specifically with augmented reality. We have a bunch of sensor information. We can do really, really cool stuff with it, but the entire field is incredibly bifurcated right now. So if you look up at top, we have Microsoft, they have Azure, which has something like cloud anchors, which allows you to have digitally rendered content that you can kind of look at the same time. So if we're all wearing a HoloLens, we could all be looking at the same thing at the same time. But if it's if it's Apple, they use Core ML for everything, and so you can only use their tech stack on their hardware. So this is what we've been focused on over the last year and a half. How do we take all of these different types of technology stacks and get that all into Unity in a way that makes sense? So we've created a new project called Project Mars. And if Editor XR was getting you, the developer, into the digital world, this is our attempt to get as much of the real world as we possibly can into Unity in a way that makes sense, so that you can make an augmented reality experience that we could all be watching right now and test it and validate it without having to be in the real world space where the augmented reality experience is going to be. So we have, I'll just be brief about this. We have new views in place, and we also have a way of telling Unity, pretend this is a real object. So if, for example, you wanted to make an augmented reality app, pretty simple. How many of you tried like mobile AR on your phone? Most of you. Usually it's something like scan the room, tap, and then you've got something here, like a toy or a game or whatever it is. So what this view does is says, pretend that this table is a real table. Now put the digital content there. And the cool thing is, because you can simulate any environment, you can start to make really interesting and complicated stuff that actually covers the world. Like, if you find a face, turn everyone into a stormtrooper. And if you find a table, put grass on every table. And if you find a door, have Darth Vader walk through the door. So you can start to make stuff that really responds to the environment. We also have a companion app that will be on for mobile phones first, but later it'll be for AR HMDs. So you can actually connect your project. This part's a little boring. So you connect your project in Unity, and then you can just go in and scan the space, like so. And it'll find different information, kind of just like you would use a mobile AR game today. But then you can actually start saying, OK, cool. When you find a plane of this size or an AR object of this size, you can sort of make it fuzzy, minimum and maximum, and then literally start laying out different projects from your assets. So in other words, it makes it as easy to make a mobile AR experience or one for HMD using your mobile phone as it is to just put a 3D sticker on your Snap Story. Next slide, please. Sorry. Next slide. Got it. Yep. OK, and this is just other examples. You can create image markers and yada, yada, yada. OK, I think I've spent enough time talking about the cool stuff that we're working on in labs. If you're doing augmented reality or virtual reality, I always love to see what you're doing. I love to talk to you about the tools that we should be making for you. But I just want to say one thing. We are trying to think about this problem as holistically as possible. Augmented reality specifically runs on top of machine learning. It can't do anything without it, particularly computer vision. And it desperately needs the cloud in order to have rendering. So as we think about the future and the tools we're making, we're thinking about this across the board. So, all right, that's all I got. Oh, you can follow us on Twitter. No, thanks.
Thank you very much. I think we'll leave the questions for later. We'll go over the presentations, and then we can have a little conversation depending on the time that we have. So next, I think, is Igal. He's going to tell us all about the project he's working on, and then after that, we'll open the floor.
Cool. Hello. My name is Igal. I run the studio named Superbright in Brooklyn, and I also teach at NYU Tisch, a VR class that's focused on mainly on network VR experiences. Superbright is a creative technology studio. We do a lot of work around immersive and physical computing and in the museum space. We do a lot of exhibit design. We do a lot of installation work, new media, and also AR, VR project. We're part of New Museum's incubator, New Inc., which is one of the first museum-based incubators in the world, which is very important for us because we're a tiny studio. So we try to become a part of a larger community, and we feed against each other, and we work with a lot of people. So this is kind of the range of work we do, which everyone is familiar with. We do a lot of VR, AR. We do mobile app development, motion capture, network VR experiences. We do IoT. But as I started thinking about it, there's so much going on. In the plane coming back from Brooklyn, I just put a reel of our work from the last 2-3 years, which is kind of a long video, but I think it will be nice to watch, and it'll give some context to what I'm talking about. So now you know everything about us. Our main focus is to design experiences, right? We're a technology studio. We work tech agnostic. We use whatever technology that's available to us at that point in time. And when you think about experience, it's not storytelling, because there could be a lot of stories in an experience. It's not really building a technology. It's creating an environment that groups of people come and go through an experience. And the foundation of that is having an environment. That's why we're coming from like an installation space where the environment where we are and the people that are coming through is really important. The second thing is the body. The body is incredible. It's really defines what computing is today to me. So for example, we did not start doing VR experiences before room scale VR was available. Only when your body is in an experience that starts making sense to us to design something. And then the technology comes on top of it. So there's a lot of space to move around in these three parts, and spatial computing, it just fits one of these sections. So for us, the core intersection of things, spatial computing, which is computing that kind of creates an understanding of your environment and you can interact with it. And physical computing is designing sensors and parts that kind of transmit what the environment is and our bodies in between it, right? So you have one body is one thing, one person, and then you have multiple people, and it becomes a whole different project. And to me, this space of creating social networked experiences is the most interesting part today of spatial computing. We have a lot of projects around this space, and we're excited to explore more stuff. So a few new things coming out of the studio right now is we're starting to build platforms and tools. This year, I started collaborating with Jessica Brilhart from Ray Pictures, and we created a new platform named Traverse, which is a spatial audio platform. Jessica approached me because she had the idea of creating a platform working with both AR technology. And in our space, a lot of the experiences we create are one-offs. You do an installation, you show it in a festival, then it's done. But she had the idea to actually create a platform, which seems like a really good idea. It's very difficult in the immersive space because technology is moving so fast. What everybody wants to do changes so fast that trying to streamline something to a platform is quite difficult. But we tried, and we launched the platform at South by Southwest this year, which won the Future of Experience Award. And we actually have a Traverse experience right on the other side of this wall with some sensors and sculptures you should go try. We are also building some tools for Traverse. Because spatial audio is so complicated, and there's so many tools, so many codecs, so much conversations happening around it, for the platform itself, we're trying to build something that anyone can come in, load their audio files, and build a spatial audio experience that you can walk through. At its core, Traverse is a platform where you can take music and put it around you, sounds around you, and walk through it and experience it in an immersive way. Another project that we're really excited about is using augmented reality in a Broadway musical. This is something we recently started working on, and I'm excited about it because in the past, people would approach our studio and be like, would you add some AR or VR to this experience? They will come and they will be like, you know, we have this show, we want to add some AR on top of it. Now, the immersive content is becoming part of the original conversation. So this is a video from the rehearsal, and what we are doing is working with the actors and trying to figure out where AR can integrate to this piece. Can it become a game? Can the audiences actually affect by contributing input to the project and define what the narrative could be in the show? So it's a very interesting project. It's challenging because we're designing custom headsets, and imagine around 300-400 people have to use this experience at the same time in a theater, right? So which brings us to this other technology that we're super excited about, which we call edge computing. So most of the AR experience today run on your phone or devices that you're using. Now we're starting to move to a space where we are actually rendering content in super powerful PCs and then streaming the data to the phones themselves. So if you have 300 people here holding a phone, when you're designing experience for it, you have to install the app to 300 phones, which takes a really long time. We've done it before. It takes a really long time. So now we're working with really high-end GPUs and servers, and the phones just send spatial information data where you're looking to the server. The server renders all the content super high quality and streams it to the phones. So this is something we have a prototype working, and we're going to be releasing something probably in September. And if you're interested in this space, please come and talk to me. I'm going to end the presentation with what we're looking for, which is, I think, a shared common thing for everyone. We are looking for better and simpler tools, right? We use every tool that exists in the industry to build things. And I also teach master students on how to build VR. And I have to say, it's an awful experience, right? The tools that we have are very complex, very overwhelming. When you open it, you get scared. So I think as the industry grows or matures, we're going to have more simplified, focused tools to do what we're trying to do. So that's something that we're also trying to build in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igal, for your presentation. We now have Nomada Studios. They're going to tell us a little bit more about what they do and their star video game, Gris.
Good morning. We're Nomada Studio, and last December, we released Gris, which is a 2D platformer made with Unity. So it doesn't have a lot in common with spatial computing, but anyway, we'll tell you a bit the story and the inspirations of the game. Yeah. For those who don't know the game, we're just going to start with the trailer. So we're going to tell you a bit our story, where we started. On my side, I studied computer science here in Barcelona. That's where I met Adrian, until I went to Ubisoft Montreal in Canada, and I work on different games that has nothing to do with Gris. Until, well, after 6 years, I decided to go back to Barcelona and transfer to Ubisoft Barcelona. Yep.
Hi, I'm Conrad Roset. I'm an artist and illustrator from Barcelona, and I am a creative director of Gris. I have worked as an illustrator and artist since I was 23 years old, more or less. I began working on the Muses project. This project focuses on the study of female body and the beautiful of female body. And during Muses, I allowed myself to experiment with different techniques, like, I don't know, watercoloring, etc. I made over 1,000 of pieces like this, etc. And so after 10 years working on the same project, I need to decide, create my own video game. I need to take a new challenge. My main hobby has always been video games. I start with Sega Mega Drive, play PS1, PS2, Wii, etc. During this time, I was playing different games. like Journey or Monument Valley. These games mark me deeply, and I decided to create my own video game, Gris. And
Well, hi, I'm Adrian Cuevas. And I started working first in a biomechanical company. I was doing motion capture and motion analysis for clinics. And one day I decided to just do a jump and do whatever I wanted to do, like whatever I wanted to try. And I decided to go to England and start working in video games. From there, I was working in Bass, the music quiz game. Then I went to Montreal, where I met with Roger again. I was working in Far Cry 3. Then I went to Denmark, where I was working in Hitman. And finally, I came back to Barcelona. And here we work in different projects, like Rainbow Six, nothing to do with Gris. But luckily, we had the luck to meet Conrad in a random party one night. And he told us that he really wanted to make a video game. And Roger and I, we met, as he said, for a long, long time. We always talk about making our own games, doing something different to what we have done before. So when we met Conrad, he explained us this idea that he had of making a video game very artistic in 2D. And it all started with this draw. This draw is the first thing he drew to us. And he was explaining how he wanted to create this kind of world. Like he creates a draw with pencil, he would like to do that in a video game. But to be honest, when I hear this, I thought it was going to go nowhere because I had to go to Montreal for 4 months. So basically, I left Spain. I went to Montreal and basically forget about it. I thought it wasn't going to happen. Luckily for me, Roger and Conrad kept talking about it, and they decided to do something.
So when Adrian left, we kept chatting with Conrad and brainstorming and thinking of ideas. Wow, the music. This is intense. So we knew we had something cool in mind, so at this point we just started prototyping and trying different stuff. Now I'm going to show you the first prototype we did for Gris, which idea was just to test the basic concept. As you see, it was very basic. We only had like 5 frames of animation. The music was stolen from another game. But we just wanted to try if the concept was actually working. So we liked it. And when Adrian came back from Montreal, we decided to work on a demo during 6 months and then look for funding, which we found, luckily. And that's when we started Nomada Studio and started the production of Gris. And, well, it was 22 months of productions. And then, well, we were all happy, and we released the game. But something interesting about our team is that 79% of the people never worked on a game before, which for us was a huge challenge in terms of training the team, teaching them the tools. But at the same time, when you don't have these preconceptions about how to do games or how games should be played, they always bring you new ideas, something really fresh that you have to control and keep in control to make sure it doesn't go too crazy. But it was super good for us. It was very beneficial for the project.
Well, I think that's basically what we can add up here, right, is ideas. We have our background of video games mostly, and what we can talk about this in this talk today is about how ideas are one of the most important things. We have technology, but you have to have ideas to use that technology. So just to give you a few of our ideas that we have during the game is which references and why we design some of the things, how we did it, like in the art, the narrative, design, animation, and music. So first for art, I will go very briefly around this, but when we started, obviously, you have to start creating a world. You start doing a lot of draws. You have to start from the beginning, just doing all kind of crazy ideas, all kind of crazy sketches. We have hundreds of these notebooks with a lot of ideas that most of them obviously were discarded, but that's where you have to start. Obviously, once you know more or less what you want to do, you have to start designing different pieces of the game. For us, the main thing was the character, because it's the star of the game. So when we start designing the character, we take a lot of reference in fashion design, and then we created our first sketches of the main character. Then there were some technical problems when you start creating a character. And for us, for example, this character, Steven, that we like it a lot, it has a lot of information in the body. When you are working with cameras and you are doing a lot of zoom outs and stuff like that, all this information it becomes very blurry, and it's just like noise. So we removed all of that. We went for something more elegant. And at the same time, this also is a technical issue when you work in animation, because you have to animate all that information. So we went to this simplification of the main character, and this is the process. We end up with this main character, which is much more elegant, much more simpler. And also, creating the world, you have also to look for references. In our case, one of the most important references is Moebius. But one reference that a lot of people don't know that we use a lot is aquascaping. Aquascaping was something very important for us when we were creating the worlds, especially this kind of aquascaping, which is called iwagumi. And this aquascaping pays a lot of attention in every detail. It has it does a composition with 3 elements, but every element is completely well studied to create something. So that's how we created most of the world. Obviously, once you have all these elements, you start to create a lot of concepts. We create hundreds and thousands of concepts. And for us, when we were developing the game, the most important thing we wanted to create is a game that looked exactly like the concept. So basically, the game looks exactly like the concept that Conrad and the art team created the first day. Then another of the elements to create a world, in our case, is also the story. We are a game that is really similar to a movie in a lot of ways, because it's a linear experience. So what we did here, first of all, is creating some kind of graph. In this case, this is the graph that is kind of our hero's journey, like it would be in a movie. So we map all the important things that is going to happen, and all the pacing, and all the feelings that we want to convey to the player in each moment. Of course, as I said, it's very like a movie, so we also did a storyboard with the whole game mapped, so you could see the most important things of the game, and also you could see the whole color progression of the game.
Design-wise, and we talk about game design, these are our main references. We don't shy away from Journey. We think it's a really important game. It was one of the first artistic games. It was a great inspiration for us. And the first thing we did was pretty much design the abilities of the main character. And here we also tried to tie it to the narrative. So we took the 5 stages of grief and tried to map it to one of each powers. For example, when you're on anger, it's the heavy ability. During depression, which is the lowest point, it's when you get the dive ability. And to build the levels, we actually had one architect with us, one of the other people in the team that never worked on a game before. And he used AutoCAD to build the game. So all the game is actually mapped in AutoCAD first. And once we tried the game, tried the pacing, make sure the level was fun, Conrad did a pass on the art. And finally, we just created the assets and built what it looked like in the end. For the animation, I'm just going to show you a quick example of the main antagonist of the game, which is the bird. And we had no idea how to animate it at the beginning. We had a lot of questions about how we could animate this. And then it wasn't until we saw this video, which is a music video, that we really had the idea of trying to mimic this style of animation, how fluid it is, all the viscosity, how smooth everything is. And I'll just show you a quick example of the introduction of the bird and what was the process to animate this, because we animated everything frame by frame, which was a lot of work. So usually what we did is map the important frames first in terms of timing and spacing to make sure it fit on the level. And as soon as we tried it and we saw that we didn't have to change anything, then it's when the animation team did the in-betweening, all the lines, painting the final colors. And this is how it looks in the final game.
Well, and last, I would like to talk about music. I think when we talk about immersive experience, one of the most important things is music. We always talk about the visuals. We talk, especially when we talk about VR and AR, about interaction, and also with the game design. But music is a super, super important part of an immersive experience. In our case, we were very lucky that we met Berlinist. Berlinist is a band from Barcelona, and they did the soundtrack for Gris. They never worked in video games before, so it's another part of the team that didn't have any experience with video games. But sometimes we don't realize how important it is to involve the musicians and sound designers as soon as possible when you are creating any kind of experience. In our case, I'm going to show you just an example of how important it is, the music in the game. And in this scene in particular, it changed completely our design when we put the music all together. Let me show you. So basically, you look at this scene without the music, it's not epic at all. And with this, it becomes something special. Well, just so you know, a few of the references that the Berlinists had when they were creating the game were other games like Another World, Ico, and Shadow of Colossus. But they also look for references outside the game industry and movies. When they were creating the soundtrack, they got the idea of synesthesia, and they look into some of the research that people made about how some notes are related to colors. So for example, when they were designing, composing the music for the rock level, the desert, which is like red, they were trying to use as much as they can the notes that are associated with those colors. This is just a reference they use, so you can get inspiration from pretty much everywhere. And last thing, I would like just to show you the final trailer that we had, so you may see some of the things we explained today. Well, that's pretty much it. I forgot to mention that tomorrow there's going to be a concert by Berlinists. They are going to play live the music of Gris. So if you like it, just go check it out. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all. I think now we have about 20 or 15 minutes for conversation. And I'm going to start with a few questions. First, I realized that I haven't introduced myself. This panel is not about me, it's all about them. But just quickly, I'll tell you my name is Sergi Sagas. I am from, I manage the division at MEDIAPRO called MEDIAPRO Exhibitions in the MEDIAPRO group. And we do theme parks and museums and stuff like that. So one of the things that we've been doing is experiences for theme parks and location-based entertainment. And one of the things that that are really evident, but people really ask us for, is the images being more and more sophisticated every time, with computers being able to process more and more data, and the amount of quality of the images being a lot better than they were just a few years ago, especially in real time. We have now a situation where most of the imagery that is done for games and is done, a lot of it is done with CGI. Now we're starting to bring a lot of capture whirl in terms of light field, in terms of volumetric capture. And I have a question for Timoni about all these, with all these new kinds of data that are obviously more heavy and require, like for instance, matching the real world with virtual worlds. You mentioned a few tools that you've been developing for augmented reality, but do you also envision having tools for importing motion capture or volumetric capture? There's obviously different vendors that do this, but as a platform, what steps or what tools are you developing for that?
Sure. So we have a couple different initiatives around capture in general. It does get a little. It's an interesting balance for Unity because really we're where you put all the content in together and then make something cool with it, ideally. But there are some gaps, right? So for example, we are in the labs working specifically on human facial capture, which is a very tedious and expensive process nowadays, and is actually one of the most difficult things to do. So we have a team that's actively working on allowing you to get very high quality depth information using a cheap, like RealSense camera instead of having to go optical or do another type of tracking system. But that project uses machine learning specifically instead of the hardware solution, so it takes a lot of training information, basically. Edge compute is also something that we're very interested in across the board, being able to render frames up in the cloud and then bring them down. Okay. When it comes to machine learning at Unity, we actually do a lot more around things like simulated player information. So if you want to do QA and test out, you can have a bunch of different agents that are all playing your game over and over again. Or creating data sets for things like self-driving cars, because you can have this extremely realistic car in Unity drive around as opposed to having a real car drive around, and it can also do this very quickly. It can be driving constantly and at a bazillion times the speed, so it can have really high quality data sets. So that's the type of stuff that we're heavily focused on. I would say it's less so on the production side. I also want to make one point too. You hand animated frames for Gris, right? They did for Cuphead as well. Have people seen the game Cuphead? No, not that popular. Okay, a couple of people. It's another 2D, like kind of 1920s cartoon style. And I remember reading a production interview, and they said they tried to do computer-generated stuff, felt like the quality bar wasn't high enough, and ended up hand drawing each frame. Which I'm sure you guys have a similar story. And so whenever people say, "Are you worried about machine learning taking over our jobs in the future? Computers are going to do it all?" Fuck no, because there's always someone who just cares so much about the details that people always end up doing crazy amount of work to really bring their vision to life. So, yeah.
And thank you. And in terms of tools, you show some tools for authoring content and for navigating. In terms of creating tools for storytelling,
yep.
Is there any work in that line that you've been working on specifically on storytelling, immersive stories, and how a platform can support the effort of artists and different people?
Yeah, I didn't get into Mars too much, but our classic story for Mars is a character walks into a room and sits down on a chair. Like, that sounds so simple, and yet in augmented reality, that is so extraordinarily difficult to do, because you need to have a device that knows what a table is and what a door is, or sorry, what a chair is and what a door is. And you also need to have procedural animation, so no matter where the chair is or where the door is, the character can know to go there and sit down. And you also have to know what to do if there is no chair, and you have to know what to do if there are two chairs, or if someone's sitting in the chair, right? Like actually dealing with the real world. So the story that you want to tell here is very simple. A character walks into a room and sits on a chair, and yet there are endless implications to that simple sentence. So in that sense, the tools you make are for storytellers. You want to tell a story, we're going to help you figure out how to avoid all the edge cases. Okay,
that's good. I'm going to have a question for each of them, and then I'm going to open it to you. I ask you to be brief in the answers, so that we have more time for them. So I was lucky enough to work on a location-based entertainment here in Barcelona that it's very fully immersive. You can not only see, but you can also touch. And one of the things that we're surprised that when people were walking is a free roam experience. So you walk around, and we put some different textures on the floor. And one of the things that people were more surprised is by how they're, what they were looking at, and they were changing, they were touching with their feet, not with their hands, with their feet, the different textures. So on one of the projects that you worked on, I think it was a Zier, you let people barefoot and have the VR experience barefoot. Yeah. Have you experienced the same thing? What do you think it is? What people really enjoy, and why did you do this? And is there any plans to do more physical, touch and stuff like that in VR? And how does that improve the experience?
Yeah, that's what we call in the studio onboarding. So when you're onboarding someone into an experience, you kind of start thinking about how will they start getting into the experience they're about to walk into. Because before you put the headset on, or before you hold the phone or start playing something, a lot of it is designing an environment that people can actually start taking part, a role in the story, right? So that experience that we're talking about was a social VR experience where 4 people go to Tunisia and go through a series of Sufi rituals. They dance, they get instruments, and it's incredible. But when people were onboarding, we got a Tunisian carpet, we got some chanting music, and before they walked into the room, they were already in the mindset of, oh, this is a Sufi shrine, and I'm going there, I'm going to have this experience. And then you take them maybe 30% there of having this idea of who they are and their role in the project, and then once they put the headset on, they're already there. So that's kind of how we think about it.
Are you thinking of using these kind of extra sensory inputs in a VR experience to improve in other experiences that you're working on now?
Yes, I mean, I think we use it on every project we do. So, for example, for this Broadway theater project that we're working on, we're designing custom 3D printed masks that are AR headsets, right? So you can take it, you can wear it, and it becomes part of the experience that you're going through. So every project we do, we start from designing the space and the experience itself, and that's how it's going to be.
Sorry, I have a question. What you're creating? You're not just like taking magic leaps and putting a thing. You're actually creating your own custom AR hardware. Wow.
Yeah, because it's like 300 people.
Yeah.
So we're taking phones and
phones.
embedding into
I was going to say, like, creating a tech stack from scratch.
Yeah.
Right, phones. Got it. Okay.
Phones embedded into 3D printed,
like
and like lenses, and then.
Like the Mira.
Yes. Similar to that,
great.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Very, very cool. And I have so many more questions, but I will let you ask. Just one more for Nomada Studios. Your experience is extremely immersive. It's very original, different. It's very immersive, but it's flat. It's 2D. And more and more the worlds now that we create are not just windows, but you basically can walk through and look at them from different angles and different points of view in 360 or in 3D. Do you have, I know that it's hard to get this painterly look or artistic look. In some ways, it's easier to do a photorealistic look in 3D than doing a nicely done, coherent, painterly look. But so that poses many, many challenges. Have you been thinking about how to turn your Gris world into a fully immersive world, or is it something that you're interested in at all?
Well, I mean, obviously when we designed Gris, we thought of it as a 2D game. It is true that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking with a friend, and he actually told us about bringing Gris to the virtual reality. But well, we thought it was just a platformer. And to be honest, it is already quite hard to control, especially camera shots, when you do all kind of parallax, stuff like that in 2D. Mm-hmm. So you can do 2D experiences in virtual reality. This has been done. Sure. And it is very nice, but it is really hard, I think. So obviously for us, we haven't thought about bringing it to the 3D world. I think if we ever do something in a 3D world or virtual reality, we will probably go for something in 3D. But it's something that we still have to investigate a bit further. I think at least when you design something for VR or AR, I think you have to think of it from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. It's not, at least I'm not a fan of adapting things. I prefer create something from the beginning to enjoy it in whatever tool or in whatever headset you're going to use or whatever.
But you do have the CAD files. I caught that.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, yes, we have the
Step
CAD
one.
files. Yeah. You can extrude and just create the world 3D.
Exactly.
No, you can do it. You can do it, and also it can add it adds some kind of immersion. And you can think of a VR game, like for example, one of the first few games I played in VR, it was like an isometric game.
Yeah.
So basically, you play like if it was a 2D game, but just looking in 3D. And that was already very immersive because you were able just to be able to tilt, to go in, zoom out. That's also bringing something to the experience for sure.
So that's one thing that I really noticed is that for the storytellers, VR is the most difficult because they are very used to telling exactly the right story. And then when you get into immersive theater, it's loosened up because there's more of a world and you have a system. And you don't want people to break the system, but it's not as much of this streamlined narrative, right? And then you get into making the tool makers like myself, and we're like, do fuck whatever you want. We don't go nuts, like break everything.
Yeah.
But I think with something like Gris, it is such an evocative world. I would love to see just a small slice, right? It doesn't have to be the story. I just want to be in this space, and I feel like you could take part of that and really do something cool with it. So no pressure, but that would be amazing.
It was
to see in
something
VR.
self-contained for sure.
Indeed.
Because obviously
Yeah.
Gris is made to the pixel. Like you move a camera to the left and you see all the
It's-
assets there. It's a
exactly,
disaster.
exactly, yeah.
So having the freedom of looking anywhere and
Yeah.
going somewhere would be nuts. But something self-contained, yeah, that could be cool.
Yeah.
But it's true that you
Like-
say that I think most of the video games developers, especially people like Roger and me that come from game developer for several years, we sometimes think like in the old industries, like in movies, for example. So
Yes.
sometimes we are too based in what we know.
Yeah.
So that's what Roger said, that it's great to bring people like Conrad, like other artists, that they are not locked in that world and they think from their own industries, let's say. So then you can start creating new experiences. But it is true that for us, sometimes it's really hard to think like, how can I make a video game not taking care of what the player is looking at right now? I want him to focus there, and he's like looking somewhere else. So that's a new thing that people are investigating, like you guys in Unity or in Disney or people like that.
I find it so fascinating that for thousands of years, humans would tell stories to each other, and every time the story would be different. And every time someone would cough or someone would shout or, like the story was never the same. And then with technology, we were able to perfect telling a story exactly the way you wanted to tell it. You have a million Marvel movies that to the pixel exactly the way they wanted people to look. So where do we go from there and never have to make it all messy again? That's the next step.
Yeah, we go back to making up stories as we go and personalizing them as we see. So that's exciting part.
Yeah,
so this is called new. Oh, so go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's probably in the future, instead of there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to be creating games, are going to be creating worlds.
Yes,
so
that's
the world
exactly right.
becomes the story, has some kind of a procedural storytelling and stuff like that. And that's going to happen for sure. I mean,
It's already happening
it's already
with like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's movies, it's video games, it's games you go to, it's cons, Harry Potter world. Like we already are starting to build out these worlds. So it'll just continue to grow.
Yeah.
For sure. In that line, this is called New Frontiers. So in terms of, obviously, there's a tendency with Internet of Things and 5G coming and all this, that there's going to be more and more sensors every time. And the way that we interact with machines in this spatial computing all around us is going to change, or is changing. Most of the tools right now use controllers still. I mean, for some things like creating them, they're probably the best option we have. But how do you see both the authoring tools and navigating your games or your experiences? How do you see the impact of using natural language or using just gestures or things that are more natural? We don't really need a special device. How do you think that's going to change things? And is that something that we're looking at?
Your turn.
It's your turn.
We try to use these technologies as long as we feel like it fits the context of what we're trying to do. A lot of times, you really have to have a really good reason to use the technology. And as long a lot of people come and they want to use the technology for the sake because the technology is very exciting and it's a trap. So we always try to kind of put it in some sort of context while we're using this particular technology because there's so much out there right now. Like you can find hundreds and hundreds of new technologies and go to a black hole. And if you have a good experience design, if you have good interaction design, technologies start kind of fitting in place. Mm-hmm. So we use them and we try to think about, we also build these tools. So we try to build certain tools for our experiences and grow them, and they mature over a course of a year or two, and then we try to recycle them.
I will say, though, people always say they want to use something more natural than controllers. We talked about this backstage. But just remember, it took you about 6 or 7 years to learn to write well with a pen or pencil. And almost anyone can pick up a game controller in 2 or 3 hours. Game controllers are actually pretty awesome.
Oh, I agree. Good. Any
Well, I was going to say that it's something that you say in your presentation. Sometimes people think that they know how they want to use things because they have their own experience of other things.
Yeah.
But usually when new technology comes, it has usually a new ways of interacting that maybe is more natural in a way. And people usually don't know because we don't have that experience.
Wait, as soon as it becomes a habit, it's natural.
Yeah.
Even if it's, here's an example. I said this tomorrow too. Have you ever heard someone say, that was so intuitive, swiping is so intuitive, a 2-year-old went up to a TV and tried to swipe the TV? Like, people have heard this before, right? Classic example. And they use this as evidence that swiping is natural. Okay, show me a kid in 1970 who was trying to swipe their TV, and I will agree that it is natural. Otherwise, that's just learned behavior.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
There's one more thing, like when you're using these tools, if you're designing a game, like you know how much time someone's going to spend with that game, right? It's kind of how much time a user is going to invest in this experience.
Yeah.
When you're doing location-based experiences, you have about 3 minutes for someone to give up to use your project. Versus if you're doing a game, you're going to invest a lot of hours, you're going to learn the controllers, and you're going to use them. So when we're using VR controllers, a lot of times we just use the gestures that you can already do with your hands. We don't teach them how to use the buttons or the triggers. Whatever they can do with their hands, they use that, and that becomes a little bit easier.
That's a good point. So I'll open now for a few questions. If you guys in the audience have any questions for any of the very talented panelists we have here today.
Just to open the floor for questions. Do you ever had any difference on analyzing gender, on when different genders are playing the game? If there is different reactions, if there is a way to make a game more gender awareness of, if there is like, we all know women has a little less like, you know, three-dimensional view, or do you see that they play in a different way if you're doing a VR or not, or do you ever measure that as an experience type of thing?
I have not measured that. Well, I make tools anyway, but I did read a study in which they had divided up player types into different categories. So some people are explorers, some people are completionists, and then some people are I don't know, let's call them fighters. Some people want to explore, some people want to do every single thing in the game, and other people just want to like fight each other. And there is no gender difference between the types of players. It is a pretty equal, what do you call it? The distribution is equivalent across genders for that particular study.
No, we didn't see anything. I think we play tested a lot, but we didn't see any real difference between female or male players. I don't remember any specifics.
No, well, basically for us it was more like a cultural thing. So, you know, video games, likely it's changing, but video games for a long time it has been more for guys, so it has been a long time like that. And in our game, from the very beginning, we wanted to do it for both, and we actually have a lot of girls in the studio, so they tried. Our friends, they tried. Our girlfriends, they tried. So we wanted to make it for both of them, and at least as we wanted to have like this smooth experience and not being frustrating. So we wanted to have something that everybody could enjoy, but I think in our case, it would be more cultural, the difference, not something actually.
I will say I had a hard time playing the game because I kept taking screenshots because it was so pretty.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. We have time for another question. If there's a pressing one there.
Hi, I wanted to ask about tools because we're talking about spatial and like creating worlds, and maybe more towards Conrad. How's your experience translating your ability on paper and on the flat world coming into the 3D world, or like the openness of freedom of view as well, and yeah, how much of that is new to you, or how much you feel you could get used to as well?
Yeah, I prefer answer in Spanish. And
I'll translate it.
thank you. Claro, yo vengo del mundo de la ilustración.
He's an illustrator. He's more in the
And-
hand.
Claro, no tenía ni idea de cómo trasladar mi arte a un mundo interactivo, ¿no? La técnica principal de Gris es acuarelas.
So it was hard for him to adapt his technique, the watercolors, to the video game world.
Sí, básicamente lo que hicimos es, gracias a Roger y Adrián, por supuesto, yo hice como muchas manchas de acuarela en un papel con el pincel a modo clásico.
He stained some paper with watercolors, just as test, as reference.
Sí, no, lo escaneamos y lo introducimos en el Unity con shaders y todo el jaleo tecnológico, pero básicamente el objetivo era trasladar al 100% mi estilo artístico a un mundo interactivo.
And then he basically scanned it, put it in Unity, and then the idea was to have that in an interactive world, which is a challenge in itself
Sí.
because of his technique.
Bueno, entre otras cosas, hicimos las acuarelas, una textura de papel,
Watercolor,
mil
paper,
cosas. Sí.
texture, lots and lots of things to get this same look or very similar look to his vision on the video game. I think they're telling me, is there another really quick question, or no? That's I think that's all the time we have. I would like you to join me in thanking this wonderful panel that we have here today. Thank you very much to all of you. And we might stay around for some private questions, but we need to let the stage for next. So thank you very much for coming.